Welcome to the show today. I'm Christopher Valentine, and I'm the author of a series of books by the nature spirits, Gnomes and Fairies, Elves and Leprechauns. And today I have a very special guest, Dr. Christian von Lahr, who is co-author along with me in these books. He is the main channel for the nature spirits that speak directly to the world through these series of incredible books. Dr. Christian von Lahr, welcome to my show.
Well, thank you, Christopher. You know, it seems like so many years ago that we first started that first book on Gnome's story. You have a copy of it right there, right?
Yeah.
Let's just show the cover of that one. Now, this was the first gnome that came into our awareness, and that sort of started a whole series of books. And Christopher, knowing that I'm a clairvoyant psychic medium and could see things, wanted me to help work with him to start this process or a technique. Like, how can we see them? How can we talk to them? How can we share this with the world? So that started this whole adventure, and it wasn't just one book like we thought. As I recall, Christopher, didn't that first book come out about this tall?
Yes.
And so we broke it down, right? Okay.
It kept growing and growing and growing, and it seemed to have specific areas of subject matter. So it fit into a different type of book for every single one that we did. And the nature spirits first started off with telling us about themselves. And just to give people an idea, Christian, what are nature spirits?
Well, nature spirits are a class of life, Christopher, as if we're a class of life, and there are angels and other class of life such as animals, minerals, and plants. But they are close to angels. They're very kin to angels in the sense that we're related to spirit. Nature spirit evolve and eventually become angels. So they're a parallel kind of life that we say to ours. And so they're evolving just like we are. They're progressing just like we are, but not quite in the same direction, not quite in the same way, not quite at the same time.
That is why they are so good. People ask us all the time, can they get people into trouble or do things like hide your keys and things like that? Yes, they can, but we're going to talk about why they do that later on. But the main thing is what Christian is saying is they are on an evolutionary path to becoming angels. So they are very, very good.
You know, that being good is something that it surprised me. Most people think that they're little imps or something, you know, and a lot of people in the past, when we were connected closer to that astral plane also, we're connecting with less friendly life on the other side, as if you would do with the Ouija board. But those weren't nature spirits, because nature spirits are directly related to angels, for one thing, and they haven't even become human, like you and I. So they have no concept of what being bad could be. They're just playful little children.
And the concept of elementals, there seems to be some confusion.
Now see, maybe that caused part of the problem, because until about 200 years ago, I don't think that the Western world even understood much about what angels were either, or another side, as you mentioned before, and certainly not nature spirits. America's kind of young, the Western world's kind of young. Life really started over in Mesopotamia and spread through that whole Far East and Eurasia area. And in those cultures, especially like in Hinduism or Buddhism, which is thousands of years old compared to our culture and Christianity and Judaism, these concepts of other kinds of life were unusual. But in those philosophies, they do speak of a nature kingdom, and they speak of elementals and elementaries and various kinds of life, and under different terms too, such as devas would probably be the more correct term. But when Madame Blavatsky and her president associate came over here and started something called the Theosophical Society, they wanted to bring the wisdom from the East here. And this was great because this wisdom goes back to like Sumerian times. The oldest text, the oldest knowledge that we have comes from the Sumerians. Not just 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 40,000 years old.
Wow.
Now in those texts, it also defines these nature spirits, and they call them bright ones, which is where that term deva came from. But there's also a term over there that was called elemental and elementaries, referring to other kinds of life, not in the nature kingdom, but more related to us actually, in the astral plane. For example, when we pass over and we leave the physical body, there's sort of an etheric body of energy around our arms. It's actually everywhere. We just see it here. And that etheric energy is exactly what nature spirits have made up, right? So this body stands around or hangs around for a couple days, sometimes up to 2 weeks. It could be called a wraith or a doppelganger, but it's somewhat visible. And all things living actually have that. And so that's hanging around for a while, and that's a classic example of what an elemental would be, this sheath. But there's also consciousness on the other side, many kinds that we don't even know of, and some of it's not as conscious as we are. So that semi-consciousness would be like elementaries. Now, unfortunately, Christopher, you're right, this term got into a lot of the publications, a lot of the books, because everybody was into this new Eastern wisdom, and because it took so long to print books and edit them, I mean sometimes years, even though they found a mistake and wanted to correct it, they couldn't. And so Blavatsky and Judge even indicated they made a mistake, not the right term, and yet even through that philosophy now that same term is used. But that's a different kind of life which can have an element of negativity to it. But when you're talking about nature spirits and nature people, hey, it's all good.
Right, so nature spirits and elementals are completely two different types of beings, nothing to do with each other.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
But angels, remember, are higher up in that kingdom, and there's a class even higher, which are the truer deva, which is something we haven't really gone a lot into in this book, maybe the others, but a deva is something even more omnipresent and more capable and more magical even than angels. But remember, the Mesopotamians, the Hindus, the Buddhists, all called that whole class of life, from nature spirits, nature people, on up to angels and devas, the shining ones, the bright ones.
Yeah.
And you know why they look that way, right? Why would they use that term?
Because nature spirits have an inner glow.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter which type. I've seen gnomes, and they almost look like angels. Their faces are so pure and so heavenly looking. And if you've ever seen fairies, and many, many people have seen them, every week we get people that come to the expos and talk to us, and they say they see fairies from children to very old adults. And a lot of people saw them when they were younger, but fairies have that distinguishing characteristic of a bright inner glow. And all of the nature spirits have it to some degree.
That inner glow is actually where we get this term halo, by the way. And I think the ancients would call that Tahas or Hamas, because the real spiritual terms exist in foreign languages. It's pretty weak in English language. But basically what that is like the aura of nature's spirits, that glow. And it's so bright that you see it. Now our density, our extreme density, actually dulls our own inner glow. But when you think of the religious stories and spiritual stories, they also spoke of saints and ascended figures as also having that inner glow. And so, when we're of a pure state of consciousness and energy, very similar terms, we tend to be brighter in comparison to ourselves.
That's really interesting.
But you know, you mentioned that at the expos, these people come to us, and I totally concur, it happens all the time, and they're seeing gnomes and leprechauns and elves and fairy. You know, the first thing I want to say, Christopher, is it is amazing, really amazing, how many people have been having experiences with nature people 20, 40, 50, 100 years back. So many times people come in and indicate that they had something going on when they were younger, they had imaginary friends to other people.
A lot of times the imaginary friends
but not to them,
spirits.
but not to them.
That's right.
And they've been conditioned that we can't have this view. But I'm saying there are thousands of people, thousands, that have had these experiences. How many times have we been on the television or the radio and someone calls up, could be a truck driver, zooming through Wyoming, literally in tears on the radio saying, thank God somebody was on the radio validating what I've seen, because I wasn't crazy. You know, the character of us is what allows us to see them. So when we're children, we're very innocent, we're very pure. We're not programmed by peers and family of what's right or wrong or what we can or can't see, right? And so we might have a natural affinity for a gnome or a leprechaun or elves and fairies because they are everywhere.
Could we be resonating with the same energy, the same childlike feelings that the nature spirits have, we have as children? Could that also be why we see them?
Well, we would certainly be resonating better with them when we're children, right? So we're certainly less resistant. So when we're open and very open as a child, and this too also depends on past lives, if we've had a succession of lives where we're open to natures and tree and connecting with nature people in the past, we'll be more receptive in this lifetime. But what happens is people are communicating with them, and then they've been told not to do that. And so, like when these truck drivers call and say, I mean, you imagine big burly guys driving a semi and like, yeah, I see leprechauns, and they're serious. And how many lectures have we gone to all over the country where I'll look around the audience, and I'll usually look for someone that seems sort of character, okay, like 6'4", burly, looks like all he does is fit pipes all day, and I'll say, you've seen a gnome when you were a child, right? And right then, they have this stunned look on their face, like deers with caught in the headlights. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have. Now, how do I do that? This is what's interesting. I don't really need the people at these expositions and shows to tell me, because the moment I sit down with them and I'm going to read them, being a clairvoyant, which is our ability to see energies of different levels of consciousness, I can actually see them around them. And like gnomes will stand on the shoulder, I'm sure you're going to want to get into that, and fairies will be flying around, and we'll see attributes of leprechauns. So they're actually being drawn to the people all the time. So what I'm trying to say is, most of us not only have the ability to see them and can experience them, we have them around us.
And you know what? When we come back, we're going to talk about what those nature spirits look like that are around us.